All our stories are created for entertainment purposes only.
I'm a 32-year-old guy, and I was married to my ex-wife, Sophie, who's 30, for about 2 years. Sophie and I were deeply in love, and honestly, it still shocks me to talk about how she cheated on me, given everything we went through together. Our story goes way back, though. Sophie and I weren't strangers when we began dating. We actually grew up in the same neighborhood as kids, so we knew each other pretty well. It's a bit sad, but when I was around 15, her family moved to a different house, and we lost touch. Years later, by pure coincidence, we ran into each other as adults. Even as a kid who didn't know much about love, I had a huge crush on Sophie. And when we crossed paths as grown-ups, that spark from my childhood crush came back to life. We chatted for a while and swapped contact info. Luckily, Sophie was single at the time. After spending weeks hanging out together, I mustered the courage to ask her to be my girlfriend, and she happily agreed. We dated for a year before deciding to tie the knot. It might sound simple, but my love for Sophie was deep, and marrying her made me feel whole. A lot had changed in both our lives, but deep down, Sophie was still that bright, witty, and lively person I remembered from our childhood. She had become a junior high school teacher, while I was working as a mechanic in an auto shop. Between us, Sophie was the brainiac, and she had a thing for smart folks. Me, on the other hand, I had an open heart and didn't specifically seek out intelligent people like she did. That was one big difference between us. Initially, when we were reconnecting and hanging out, I sometimes felt like I wasn't on her level. However, as I got to know her better and we fell head over heels in love, I gained more confidence. But I always made an extra effort to keep her happy. Our marriage was a blast full of fun, sweetness, and laughter. Sophie had a special talent for making married life incredibly enjoyable and peaceful. We hardly ever argued or fought. Back when we were dating, Sophie told me how much she disliked being yelled at. She made me promise that I would never raise my voice at her, no matter how upset I might be. I vowed to keep my cool in any situation, and she promised the same. So, when we had disagreements, they sounded intense, but our voices never got raised. As for our thoughts on having children, Sophie and I were on the same page. We didn't see the point in waiting for years before starting a family. To me, it just didn't make sense. I preferred having a child within a year or two of getting married so that our child could grow up with us as we aged together, rather than waiting until we were much older to have our first child. Right after we tied the knot, we were eager to start a family. There were moments when Sophie thought she might be pregnant because she missed her period, only for it to arrive the next day. But in the first year of our marriage, she did get pregnant once, but sadly, she suffered a termination after just a month, and we lost the baby. It was an incredibly emotional and tough time for both of us. We had been eagerly waiting to conceive for months, and when it finally happened, we faced this heartbreaking loss. After that first loss, we decided to take a break from trying for a while before attempting again. Unfortunately, history repeated itself, and Sophie had another loss at around 5 weeks into her pregnancy. The second time, she woke up one morning and noticed heavy bleeding. When we rushed her to the hospital, it was confirmed that she had suffered another loss. This whole experience took a heavy toll on us emotionally, and for several months the thought of trying for another child was too painful to even discuss. I did my best to support her during this difficult period and tried to stay strong for the both of us. As time passed, we slowly moved forward, leaving behind the pain of those 2 terminations. I understood that Sophie needed time to heal emotionally, so I made a conscious decision not to bring up the topic of having children until she had fully processed her grief. Our marriage eventually bounced back from those challenging months, and life returned to a sense of normalcy. Even when things seemed fine, I continued to treat Sophie like a queen and catered to her every need. Besides her work as a school teacher, she didn't have to worry about anything else at home. I took charge of cooking, cleaning, doing the laundry, tending to our lawn, grocery shopping, and even preparing special meals for her on occasion. I was extremely attentive because I knew she had been feeling like something was wrong with her and that she brought bad luck due to the loss. My primary goal during that time was to reassure her that she was absolutely not at fault and that I loved her deeply. About 4 months after we lost our second pregnancy, one weekend while I was doing my usual house cleaning routine, Sophie approached me with tears in her eyes. When I got back from the kitchen and those messages kept popping up, I decided to silence her notifications, not wanting to disturb Sophie's sleep. But as I attempted to hush her phone, the messages just kept pouring in, both on WhatsApp and Instagram. My curiosity got the best of me. Since her phone had a fingerprint lock, I used her fingerprint to unlock it and see who was bombarding her with messages. Once I got into her phone, I noticed the sender was a contact saved with a single love emoji. Naturally, I wondered who this person was, and my heart sank when I started reading their messages. From their conversation, it became evident that she was chatting with a guy who kept asking about the well-being of my baby and inquiring about her health and pregnancy. I had to go through their messages repeatedly to grasp the situation, trying to figure out if he was a doctor or something. After some digging, I determined he wasn't. Meanwhile, I was also checking out her Instagram. To my surprise, the same guy had messaged her there, and shockingly, he even sent her a picture of his private parts. I wouldn't have known about their Instagram communication if it weren't for that message. It was through their Instagram chat that I discovered Sophie had been unfaithful to me. Naturally, I was compelled to find out who this guy was and what had led her to cheat on me. As I delved into his Instagram profile, I learned that he was a scientist. I couldn't believe it. It took me the entire night to come to terms with the fact that this wasn't some awful dream. What hurt the most was realizing that I had been tirelessly working to create a comfortable home for a child who wasn't even mine. That night, I packed a few clothes and drove over to my friend's house to spend the night. I couldn't bear to be around Sophie after uncovering her deceitful actions. The icing on the cake was discovering that her affair partner knew she was married to me. He would occasionally ask her about how I was treating her and the baby, to which she'd respond with something like, "Yeah, he's trying." Reading that she had portrayed me as just trying to be a good partner and father infuriated me. I had been shouldering all the responsibilities around the house, taking care of her, preparing her favorite meals at odd hours of the night, giving her massages, and dealing with her erratic mood swings. Learning about her betrayal was truly devastating. It was incredibly hurtful for her to cheat on me with another man and then deceive me about the child's paternity. Around 3 a.m, Sophie woke up and realized I wasn't home. She called me, wondering why I wasn't there, and I replied in a distant tone that I had some unfinished work at the automobile shop. I assured her I'd be back home later in the morning, but I didn't keep my word. In fact, I didn't return home for 4 days, leaving her in a state of panic. During those 4 days of my absence, Sophie repeatedly tried calling me, but I deliberately ignored her calls. She eventually decided to visit the automobile shop where I worked, only to be told that I had requested a week off due to family matters. In the midst of all this, I created a fake Instagram account to dig deeper into Sophie's affair partner. My investigation revealed that he had been a scientist for several years and even received a prestigious award. I also discovered that he was married to a woman who happened to be a psychologist, and they had 2 kids together. Wanting to expose the truth, I reached out to his wife on Instagram, being straightforward about the situation and providing the evidence, including pictures of their conversations on Sophie's phone. She got back to me the following day, arranging a meeting for us. I met her on the 4th day, the same day I returned home to Sophie. During our meeting, she couldn't believe her husband was cheating on her, even after seeing the evidence. She was heartbroken and almost overwhelmed when I revealed that my wife, Sophie, was pregnant with her husband, Lowell. We decided that we would both confront our respective spouses about the affairs. I couldn't hide my own hurt and anger, which had been festering during those 4 days away. When I finally returned home that evening, Sophie ran to me, but as soon as I stepped into the living room, I told her I wanted to do a paternity test for the baby, catching her by surprise. She questioned my sudden demand for a paternity test, to which I explained that I needed to be certain the baby was mine. She laughed it off, considering it ridiculous, and refused to agree to a paternity test, claiming that the baby was undoubtedly mine. I could tell she was attempting to manipulate the situation. If I hadn't known the truth, her acting might have convinced me that I was the father of her child. That day, I raised my voice at her for the first time in years, and she was taken aback by my reaction. What followed was her crying and accusing me of falsely accusing her of cheating, expressing disbelief that I would do such a thing after all we had been through. I observed as she cried and tried to emotionally manipulate me, but I stood my ground, insisting on a paternity test, regardless of her condemnation. I had printed out copies of the pictures I had taken of her chat conversations, and I threw them at her. She was shocked to see that I had uncovered her truth. After a brief silence, she claimed that it was just harmless flirting with the man, and nothing physical had occurred between them. Her explanations were so feeble that I didn't even feel like arguing with her. Instead, I emphasized that any man referring to her baby as his own was a serious matter, which is why I needed to see the paternity test results. We argued for hours, but eventually, she agreed to undergo the paternity test. We went ahead with the test, and when the results came in, they confirmed that the baby was not mine. By this point, Sophie knew that pretending was pointless, so she began asking for forgiveness. She lied, saying she got pregnant through a donor and didn't know who the father was. I could see through her deception, but I was too angry and exhausted to confront her, so I left her at the hospital. I returned home and packed most of my belongings. While I was in the middle of packing, she came home and tried to stop me. In that moment, my anger reached its peak, and I could have done something regrettable, so I left the house. No matter how hard I tried to convey my disappointment and heartbreak, words couldn't fully express my feelings. As I was leaving, Sophie became dramatic, hurling insults at me. Despite her efforts to make me stay, I left the house, and we didn't communicate for another week. She called me daily, leaving various voicemails of her crying, shouting, and pleading. It was as if she had multiple personalities. Just 2 days ago, her parents called and berated me. They labeled me a deadbeat father and claimed I was the worst father any child could have. Honestly, I was in no mood for drama, so I wanted to quietly divorce Sophie without disclosing her infidelity to anyone. Knowing that Sophie cheated on me and caused our relationship to fall apart, she still went ahead and spread lies about me to her parents, friends, and anyone who would listen. I can't stand people calling me out for things I didn't do, especially when I know it's Sophie who should be held responsible. Her parents even threatened me with dire consequences if anything happened to their daughter or the unborn child. Although the child is not mine, I don't want the unborn baby to suffer, so I'm choosing to stay quiet until she gives birth. Update. Someone here mentioned my desire to divorce Sophie without causing a fuss. I want to clarify that I'm dead serious about it. I've had my fair share of marital problems in this relationship. It becomes even more bewildering when I think about the possibility that Sophie may have been cheating on me from the first year of our marriage. Some of you pointed out that marrying Sophie within a year seemed too fast. I believed I had known her since childhood, so dating for a year didn't seem rushed. But all of that is in the past now. Last week, I made a public post on Facebook hinting at the heartbreak Sophie had caused and how our plans were shattered. A Facebook friend of Sophie reached out to me after seeing the post. You know how social media connects people? He happened to be a fellow teacher at Sophie's school, and he mentioned that he had something important to share about Sophie. I agreed to meet up with him, and he dropped a bombshell. Sophie had been having affairs with some of the fathers of her students. At first, I couldn't believe what he was saying until he showed me a short video he had secretly recorded a while ago. According to him, Sophie had a penchant for getting involved with the fathers of the bright kids in her class, and it seemed like she was pursuing them aggressively. He claimed he wanted to help me avoid trouble, which is why he decided to share this information. Additionally, he mentioned that the school was aware of Sophie's misconduct, which was the real reason she was let go from her job, not because she chose to quit. It meant that during the time I was struggling to take care of Sophie while neglecting myself, she had been cheating on me. It had to be the only explanation because her income didn't change one bit. Every morning she'd get all dressed up for work and return home around the usual noon. She'd even spin these stories about how much fun she had with the kids in her class, which I now know were total lies. Saying I felt used by Sophie would be a massive understatement. I've never been deceived, used, or manipulated like this by anyone before. Hearing all of those revelations stirred up a level of anger in me that I didn't even know was possible. In the meantime, I've already contacted a lawyer to start the process of getting our divorce papers sorted. Once the divorce is finalized, I'm not entirely sure what my next move will be. But rest assured, I'll keep you all updated on how things progress with Sophie and her never-ending dramas. I'm eager to hear your thoughts and comments on this. Update. As you all rightly pointed out, taking Sophie back would be like shooting myself in the foot. I no longer have any love left for her, and I don't even feel an ounce of pity. If she could pull off something this terrible while I was doing everything I could to be a good and supportive husband to her and to what I believed was our child, who knows what else she might do? I'm not exaggerating here. A person like Sophie is capable of anything. So I finally decided to confront her parents, who had been incessantly calling. I went ahead and shared the pictures of the conversations between her and her affair partner in their WhatsApp family group chat. I also sent a lengthy voice note to explain everything just in case anyone had trouble reading. All of this happened before my final showdown with Sophie. I told her straight up that I knew about her affairs with multiple men, and that the father of her child was actually a scientist. The look on her face showed that she didn't see that coming. She had already lost weight from all the crying, pondering, and begging for me to talk to her over the past few days. I thought she'd continue to plead with me, but she knew her time for pretending was up. Instead, she got defensive and admitted to having an affair with the scientist. She even shamelessly told me she did it because she wanted good genes for her baby, not my supposedly weak and dumb genes. I couldn't believe she said that to my face, but she did. What she didn't know was that I had already reached out to her affair partner through his wife and informed them that I had discovered Sophie was a serial cheater. I knew Sophie didn't show any remorse when she admitted to the affair because she was probably expecting hefty child support payments from him. Unfortunately for Sophie, her affair partner also wanted to reconcile with his wife, so he insisted on a paternity test, too. Shockingly, the results showed that he wasn't the child's father either. It turned out that during that time, Sophie had been with multiple partners, including me, the scientist guy, and 2 other men, one of whom was the father of her students. She couldn't determine who the real father was. About 2 weeks later, after her affair partner learned he wasn't the father, my lawyer sent her the divorce papers. Initially, she refused to sign them, claiming that I had ruined her life and that I had to stick with her. It was quite a laughable situation. On a different note, when her parents discovered that she didn't know who the father of her child was, they disowned her in shame. Eventually, she gave in and signed the divorce papers, and we are officially no longer together. She attempted to outsmart me but ended up losing everything, including her family. Now she'll have to raise the baby on her own, and I genuinely hope she can find the baby's father. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who suggested I contact her affair partner in my last update. It played a significant role in revealing the truth and bringing closure to this chapter of my life.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
I'm a 34-year-old male, and I married my wife, Nina, who is 29 years old, 5 years ago. It feels like just yesterday when she moved into our neighborhood and came to my doorstep with a plate of homemade cookies. She baked those cookies as a friendly gesture to get to know her new neighbors. It's not every day you see someone serving homemade cookies to their neighbors. Nina was a very cheerful and vibrant person who was friendly with everyone. When she brought over those cookies, I invited her in for a cup of coffee. We quickly became friends and bonded over coffee and cookies. We dated for 2 years before exchanging our wedding vows. One thing Nina loved as much as she loved me was her garden. She had a real passion for plants. With her background in botany, she even owned a small nursery. Her personal garden was like her baby. She cherished all the flowers she had planted there. It might sound unusual, but every morning she would actually talk to her plants while watering them. Before we got married, Nina made it clear that I would have to move in with her because she couldn't bear to leave her garden. She didn't ask. She just informed me of her decision. I didn't mind at all because I fully understood her deep passion and love for her garden. So without any hesitation, I moved in with her. Our married life was running smoothly until recently. The qualities that initially attracted us to each other have now become a source of tension. You see, Nina and I have quite contrasting natures. As I mentioned earlier, Nina is an extremely outgoing and sociable person. She has a wide circle of friends and easily makes new ones. In contrast, I'm the exact opposite. I'm an introvert and somewhat shy. I don't feel at ease conversing with just anyone, and I only form connections with a select few. I prefer spending a significant amount of my free time at home rather than going out. My ideal holiday involves staying at home with Nina, watching TV, and cooking a nice meal for the both of us. On the other hand, Nina enjoys going out, whether it's dining at a cafe or meeting up with friends. Given our differences, we established some ground rules at the start of our marriage to prevent major conflicts. We ensured that we could both engage in activities we enjoyed. Saturdays were reserved for going out, something Nina loved. Sundays, on the other hand, were designated as our stay-at-home days, allowing us to spend quality time together, which was something I cherished. This arrangement worked well for us for quite some time. However, things have taken a somewhat unusual turn in recent weeks. Nina has been spending a lot of time outside the house. She frequently meets up with friends or attends various social events. Lately, it feels like Nina is hardly ever at home with me. It's not that she's intentionally leaving me behind or neglecting me. She always invites me to join her when she goes out to meet her friends at parties, but I usually decline. By the time I return home from work, I often feel too socially drained to even consider going out and mingling with people. There were a few occasions when I reluctantly agreed to accompany her, but I didn't enjoy those parties. Engaging in conversations felt challenging, and I was utterly exhausted by the end of the night. So the next time Nina asked me to join her with her friends, I opted to stay home. Truthfully, I miss her presence around the house. She's been going out more frequently than usual, and I find myself missing her when she's away. When she does return home, she's usually too tired and heads straight to bed. I've started longing for our deep conversations and the connection we used to share. I don't want to be the type of husband who prevents his wife from pursuing her interests. I want her to go out and do what she loves. However, it seems like Nina might not be as interested in spending as much time with me, and that's been bothering me. I wonder if she's grown tired of our relationship, or if it's just a phase of busyness for her. I understand that there aren't any clear signs of problems in our relationship, but after reading numerous stories of infidelity here, I find myself being more cautious and not wanting to overlook any potential red flags. I hope this feeling is just temporary and will eventually fade away. Update. After reading the responses to my previous post, I realized that it was better to have an open and honest conversation rather than silently sulking in a corner. I decided to communicate my feelings and insecurities directly to Nina. While I wasn't overly insecure, being an introvert in a relationship with an extrovert presented some challenges. We sometimes worry that our partner might get bored with us because we're not as outgoing as they are. Additionally, introverts tend to overthink things, and before the confrontation, I had come up with numerous plans in my head on how to express my feelings without hurting her. I had put myself through unnecessary mental anguish, and I knew it was counterproductive. The best approach was to have a straightforward conversation with her and share the concerns on my mind, then work together to find a solution. One day, when Nina returned from her nursery, I told her that I needed to talk to her about something. She was surprised by my sudden request for a serious conversation. I opened up and shared everything that had been bothering me. After listening to me, she genuinely apologized and acknowledged that it was a wake-up call for her. She assured me that she would make an effort to avoid making me feel that way in the future. Nina explained that she had been going out frequently because many of her friends were in town after a long time, but she was willing to return to our previous routine that we both enjoyed. I was relieved that Nina responded to the situation with maturity and understanding rather than dismissing my feelings or becoming defensive. She respected my emotions, and I appreciated her for that. We both agreed that having an open and reasonable conversation had been the right way to address the issue. It felt wonderful to have a conversation like two adults deeply in love and understanding each other. Following that day, Nina and I returned to our previous routine where we made time for each other, and I believed that things would improve for us. And for a while, they did get better. However, this positive change didn't last long. About 2 weeks later, Nina started behaving the same way as before. She began coming home late from the nursery, frequently hung out with her friends, and I found myself alone at home as usual. What was most surprising and concerning was that I noticed Nina had started neglecting her beloved home garden. I had always been certain that Nina cared more for her garden than she did for me. It was like her baby. Seeing her disregard it was unsettling. This made me realize that something wasn't quite right with Nina, and something else had taken priority in her life over us, me and her garden. One day, out of boredom, I decided to water the plants in the garden since Nina wasn't around. That's when I discovered that one of the plants had died. It was alarming because I knew how much these plants meant to her, and she would never be so careless with them. When she came home that evening, I showed her the dead plant. To my surprise, Nina had no idea about it. She left her dinner half-eaten and rushed to the garden to check on her remaining plants, with me following behind. Nina was truly saddened when she saw the dead plant. Although she didn't burst into tears, she was visibly upset. She blamed herself, acknowledging that her busy schedule and social life had caused her to neglect her garden. Nina kept blaming herself and vowed to prioritize her responsibilities from that point onward. I just looked at her, hoping she would return to her usual self. From that day on, Nina became extremely attentive to her plants, taking excellent care of them as she always had. Interestingly, she didn't cut back on her social outings. She began waking up early to tend to her plants before going out in the evenings. Spending time with me seemed to be of little concern to her. Her primary focus was going out and nurturing her beloved plants, which she affectionately referred to as her babies. I know it might sound irrational and bizarre, but I've started feeling somewhat jealous of her garden and her friends. I've already discussed my feelings with her, and she initially promised to divide her time equally, but now she's reverted to her old routine. I don't feel like having another confrontation. It would make me feel foolish. I genuinely want to resolve this issue, but I don't want to discuss it with her again. So I decided to create some distance between us. 2 nights ago, I did something foolish. When I returned home from work, Nina was already there. She kissed me and mentioned that she was heading out to meet a friend. She had set up dinner for me, but I was angry, though I didn't voice it. As soon as she left, I left the house as well. I didn't even touch the dinner she had prepared on the dining table. Instead, I called an old friend and spent time with him. I don't have many friends, so we had a lot to catch up on after not seeing each other for a long time. My friend left around 9, but I didn't return home. I went to a bar and spent hours there. I don't typically drink much, but that night I got quite drunk. I had no intention of going back home. Instead, I thought about booking a hotel room and spending the night there. So I went ahead and booked the hotel room. When Nina called me, I declined the call purposefully, not wanting to talk to her or even see her face. She texted me almost immediately, asking where I was. I made the deliberate choice not to respond. I sat on the hotel room bed, staring at the ceiling, questioning if my actions were foolish. But at that moment, I had no desire to engage with her. I wanted her to experience a fraction of the loneliness I felt every day, so I let her worry as I fell asleep almost instantly. The following morning, I woke up late due to the previous night's drinking. Unsurprisingly, I had a headache. I turned on my phone and found a barrage of texts from Nina expressing her concern. Apparently, she had been worried about me. I decided to return home, and as I arrived, Nina was preparing to leave for work. Upon seeing me, she bombarded me with numerous questions, demanding to know where I had spent the entire night. She claimed to have been extremely worried. Her tone was filled with anger, which strangely brought me some satisfaction. I didn't lie to her. I explained that I didn't want to come home to her since she was rarely there. I often found myself alone, so I opted to spend my time outside the house. This statement triggered an outburst from Nina, accusing me of seeking attention like a child. Her defensive reaction infuriated me even further. Instead of acknowledging her own faults, she shifted the blame onto me. It was frustrating. We engaged in a heated argument, holding nothing back, and exchanged hurtful words. Eventually, she left for her nursery, as neither of us was willing to back down. I needed to write this update to vent my feelings. The situation has become increasingly unbearable for me. I'm torn between wanting to follow her to see what she's up to or considering hiring a private investigator. I've simply reached my limit. Update. Guys, I have to admit, that red flag I mentioned earlier was real, and I'm relieved I didn't ignore it. So, after that major argument, Nina and I completely stopped communicating with each other. Neither of us was willing to apologize or make amends. We were both seething with anger. We shared the same house, but refused to exchange a single word. Our daily routines continued as usual. I prepared breakfast and she took care of dinner, but the silent tension persisted. This time, I had decided not to be the first one to step forward and resolve the conflict. It wasn't a matter of ego. It just didn't feel right. A week later, when I returned home from work, I walked into a surprise. The lights were off, which was unusual because Nina typically arrived home before me. I switched on the lights and was taken aback. Nina had prepared a surprise for me. There was a cake on the living room table along with balloons and a poster that read, "I'm sorry." Nina approached me, hugged me, and apologized. I won't deny that it felt good to see her effort. She acknowledged that it was her fault for not listening and paying attention to me. We made up, and Nina even cooked my favorite meal. We enjoyed our food and had a lengthy conversation for the first time in a while. I felt relieved, and everything seemed to fall back into place. There was so much to catch up on since our fight. I had feared that Nina had grown to despise our relationship and didn't care anymore. She had appeared so indifferent, and I was afraid that our 5-year marriage was on the brink of collapse. However, she did all of this, which reassured me that she was willing to put effort into our marriage to make it work. Her love for me brought happiness to my heart. Unfortunately, that happiness was short-lived as I soon encountered the harsh reality of Nina's actions. A few days after our reconciliation, my heart was shattered in the most painful way imaginable. I was at my office when I realized I had forgotten some crucial documents I needed at home. I had worked late the previous night and had left them on the study table. My office wasn't far from home, so I decided to quickly go back and retrieve them. I drove home expecting an empty house. However, I was taken aback to see Nina's car in the driveway. She had left for the nursery in the morning, so why was she back home? As I approached the house, I heard the voice of a man, and it sent a chill down my spine. Something felt terribly wrong. Who could be with Nina in our house at this time of day? For a moment, I wanted to flee, as I wasn't prepared to face the truth. My thoughts were in disarray as I entered the house. To my shock, I discovered her engaged in an intimate encounter with our neighbor. It was utterly disgusting to find out that she was involved with our loser neighbor. This man, AP, had recently moved into our neighborhood, and since then, Nina had been behaving strangely. I couldn't fathom why she seemed to befriend anyone and everyone. I was certain that Nina had initiated this friendship, and things had taken a darker turn. It felt like a déjà vu moment, imagining how their relationship had developed in a manner similar to how it had between us. I stood there in shock for a moment before chasing AP out of my house. My anger made me want to harm him, but more than him, I was repulsed by my wife's actions. I wanted to throw her out of the house, but it was her property. She begged me, claiming it was a one-time mistake and that they both regretted it deeply. She asked for a chance to make things right, but I couldn't bring myself to believe her. Though I didn't need to prove my instincts to her, I had a strong desire to expose her betrayal. I headed straight for the door camera, realizing that it might have captured the person who had entered my house. We had never once checked the camera's recordings in all the years we'd lived here. Our neighborhood had always been safe, and we had never faced such a situation. But now, it was time to put that camera to use. I opened the footage in front of her and began playing recordings from the past few days simultaneously. I fast-forwarded to the afternoon when she was with him. The recordings made it painfully clear that this wasn't a one-time occurrence. I felt a surge of anger towards both of them, him for his despicable actions and her for her betrayal. Without saying a word, I packed my bags and left the house. She begged me to stay and talk, but I simply pushed her away and walked out. For now, I've checked into a hotel while I figure out my next steps. I'm in contact with the divorce lawyer and looking for a new place to live. I've blocked Nina on all channels, and even after a week, I still see her messages in the spam folder, but I can't bring myself to read them as it fills me with anger. I'll provide an update once this chapter of my life comes to a close. Update. When I made my last update, my mental state was in a pathetic condition. But as I write this now, I realize how far I've come on the path to healing. During that dark period, revenge consumed my thoughts. I yearned to devise a plan that would inflict the same pain on Nina that she had caused me. I wanted her to experience the anguish I had felt. I began plotting my revenge relentlessly. It became an obsession. I felt I needed to get even. Nina couldn't escape unscathed after what she had done to me. I brainstormed various ways to make her suffer, but life had other plans, and I eventually moved on after the divorce was finalized. I had intended to provide an update once the divorce was settled, but I didn't want to revisit my past through this thread, so I chose to ignore it. I apologize for that. I did respond to all the kind individuals who checked up on me through PMs and comments. About a week ago, Nina reached out to me through a new email address as I had blocked her on all previous platforms. She conveyed that she was in a miserable state on multiple fronts. She shared with me that AP had betrayed her in the worst possible way. Shortly after our divorce, AP moved in with her. As I mentioned before, he was a lazy individual without a proper job, relying on Nina's income. At Nina's request, he began working at her nursery to assist with the workload, but that's when he started his scheme. He began shipping nursery plants outside and selling them at lower prices to pocket some extra cash. Nina quickly noticed the disappearance of these plants. When she confronted him, he claimed they had probably been stolen during the night. Meanwhile, he managed to obtain ownership papers for the nursery and sold it to make a quick fortune. Afterward, he vanished with the money, leaving her in the lurch. Nina was utterly devastated, having lost something that meant the world to her. Now she finds herself in a dire situation, lacking emotional support and facing financial struggles, completely alone. I replied to her with a single text, reminding her that she had made me feel the same way. Now she was lamenting the waste of her efforts, and I couldn't help but draw a parallel. I had spent numerous years nurturing our relationship, only for her to discard it so easily in favor of a fling with our neighbor, who clearly wasn't serious. It felt like her karma catching up to her, as she was experiencing the pain she had inflicted on me. That day, my belief in karma grew stronger. Nina was reaping what she had sown, and it was not to her liking. Despite my clear declaration of wanting no contact with her, Nina made several attempts to reach out and apologize. However, I remained steadfast in my decision to ignore her. I learned from a friend that she was facing significant financial troubles due to the loss of her nursery. The neighbor she had cheated on me with had vanished from her life and returned to his wife, leaving Nina utterly alone in every aspect. Moving on from that divorce was far from easy, and it left me shattered. But I had no other choice. I threw myself into my work to keep her thoughts from haunting me, and it proved to be beneficial. I worked diligently to stay occupied and eventually earned the promotion I had always desired. This achievement would not have been possible without prioritizing myself and my mental health. I severed all ties with my past and focused wholeheartedly on the present, which allowed me to regain control of my life and find stability.